right, so we're recording. So your chapter is on race, disability, class, and gender in special inclusive education, the case of Sweden.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it is a bit alarming, the situation about disproportionality in special education. It could be there also. You see, in the past, in the 60s, 70s, Sweden was rather homogeneous society, but during the past 30 years, more and more immigrants are entering the country, and it's nice. The diversity is really nice, but immigration brought with it some problems, So one of the main problems is that children or students with immigrant background are overrepresented in special classes, and you find also problems, educational difficulties, and then it's the main problem is that the overrepresentation is. It's immigrants. They are poor. Okay, in quotation mark. In Sweden, it's all relative. Okay, so people have a good apartment and welfare is working pretty well, but still, they are poor, disabled, boys, and what was the other dimension? These three are aggregated. Let me say again, disability, ethnicity, class, and gender, yes. So it's so difficult to disentangle what causes what. I mean, what is the purpose of the major cause for some group of students end up in special educational services or end up in committing antisocial activities or crime. It's really difficult. What is it because the economy is not, they are poor, or is it because of the disability, or is it because of the migrant background? So I think it's very important to disentangle this area. It's a very acute, honestly speaking. This problem. We start to discuss about disproportionality in special education after mass migrations. So it is. Is it really is it because they are immigrants that there is some problem? There is also different conceptualization or theory about it. Some with nativists, so scholars who believe in how do you call the biological aspects of learning. They might tell you that maybe there's something with minority groups. It's not. The problem is not in the school. The problem is with some groups of students who come from this specific land, this specific country, and it's controversial, and I don't buy that argument. And usually, the main problem lies with the school. The schools are not well prepared to handle this cumulative problem or this aggregated, and so it's four problems together in one group of in a certain group of students. So I think my idea was to bring to light this problem, and it's possible to work with it and ameliorate or improve the situation. So it's in some ways very sad. A country like Sweden, which has been known for universalism and comprehensiveness and social inclusion and very well developed welfare system, and that we encounter this problem, and it's getting complicated, because especially this problem is you find this problem in segregated areas of cities, big cities. And the immigrants are, like in Gothenburg, where I come from, you find 6 or 7 very vulnerable, we call them in Swedish, vulnerable areas, or susceptible or troubled areas. I can't find it. I can't find a good English for it. So, and then you see the schools are not well prepared to handle it. The schools which are located in these areas, segregated areas, and the turnover of teachers, our retention is problematic, because they can't handle like in one class you can find 25 pupils or students from 20 different countries, and with different needs, educational needs, special education. I mean, and it's difficult for Swedish teachers. They're well trained, well educated. There is no problem with the competence. The teachers are competent, but it's unbearable, to handle many languages, and especially, okay, you can handle the language aspect, but the most difficult is the socio-emotional problem and behavioral problems. Whether that, it can be that, for instance, I don't need to mention an ethnic group, children who come from one ethnic group, they have a tendency to speak very loud. And the teachers, I've seen many teachers struggling with that. Can you keep quiet? So can you talk in low voice? So your voice or your sound, your noise disturbs the class. And they get upset, the kids. But it's not that these kids are angry or irritated or something. It's just that the language, the native language is very expressive. Like, Hebrew language, Italian language, Somalian language. When you talk, you sound as if you are angry or upset, irritated. So it's also cultural problems. For teachers, it's very challenging to understand why this student with 2 years sojourn residence in Sweden behave the way he does. What could be the reason? Or is he not following up? Has he got problem with the language? That language acquisition in Swedish is a difficult language. You don't master it in 2 years or 3 years. So there are challenges that the kids or the pupils bring with them to school, and it's very difficult for teachers to handle. And that is the problem has to do with the segregation. If we had placed these students or kids into different schools in the city, or busing, it might solve a great deal. I mean, like having 90% of the pupils with immigrant background in one school. So there is a school, for instance, in Gothenburg, Shumila school, Shumila Skola, they call it Shumila School. I think there are 504 kids, pupils. It's a primary school, and there are only 4 natives, ethnic Swedes in that school. So 500. I don't know. I mean, like they come from maybe 80 countries or 75 countries, and they don't speak Swedish in how do you call it, outside class. In the corridors you hear them. You hear several languages, mostly Arabic and Somalian language. So it's so difficult, to build communication, with the teachers, so there's always problems. Someone disturbed and the flow of lesson, get disrupted. And then the schools will be obliged to employ less competent or teachers with no qualification. I mean, they are good at the subject matter they teach, but they don't have the pedagogical competence. So this all complicates the matter. So I don't know what to do about it, but I think Denmark has an idea. I think they are working on a model. There is a pilot project in these segregated school areas that I think a school is not supposed to accommodate, accept more than 50%. I think, yes, the number of immigrants in one school shouldn't exceed 40%, something like that. So it's a good motive. So that's how you solve the problem partly. But still, this is also controversial because parents want their children to study in the nearby school, and this transportation, is also a hurdle for many. So, and also there are discriminatory practices. That's also very it's problematic. Before placement into special education, what do really the psychologists and the teachers do? Do they have a real reliable assessment material, assessment text? So this is also questionable. Me and some of my friends, we have found out that the methods are not reliable. So you have to refine the methods so that the criteria take into consideration the child's linguistic aspect, linguistic competence, language competence, and cultural also. It could be simply that when a student is too quiet, or how do you call it, silent in a classroom, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's sluggish or he's not concentrating. It could be that the child is not used to, the children want the adult, the teacher, to get initiative, because in the culture it's adults, it's not, children are not expected to take initiative, they keep quiet. So that quietness or reticence, maybe the word, can be considered as this kid is weak. So there are a lot of communication problems which complicate the disproportionality in special educational placements. What can I say?
That's sufficient. That was wonderful.
But if you pose question, I can.
I think that we've got about 13 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about. I was looking at the chapter. You talked a lot about some of the kind of the key points as I was kind of scrolling through. Mm-hmm. What I particularly liked about your contribution was the connection to social justice.
Yeah.
And bringing in that to a conversation of inclusive learning is what our field really needs.
And then one thing which complicates this issue is policy matters. The changes, the educational policy changes are framed within neoliberal philosophy orientations. So we have been hearing since the past 20 years or 15 years these concepts such as standardization and competition, effectivity, and school choice also, which means parental choice, which means that parents decide to where the kids get placed. For instance, if you want to have an inclusive classroom, maybe this non-disabled kids' parents, they don't want their kids to study together with disabled children or children with ADHD. So this is a new phenomenon in Sweden that parents have choice. They have a say. No, it shouldn't be like that. They involve or interfere in school world a bit too much, especially native ones. They are well informed. But of course, the poor ones, or parents with immigrant background, they have very little knowledge about how the schools are run, so they don't bargain or they don't put pressure on teachers. So this is not good either. But on the other hand, this parental choice has caused problem in many schools that they can take out their kids from school and place it in another school. So you can't force them. So the policies are also contradictory in Sweden. That you hear on one side, you hear this universalism, inclusion, solidarity, and all those things. It's still there, but then comes other policies which emphasize the importance of competition and standardization. They are new for Sweden. And that's problematic. But mostly it is the migrant background which is not properly understood. Disability, okay, we have been researching on disability and inclusion many years, but this is a new phenomenon, this influx, flood of immigrants from many countries. In the past, in the 60s, 70s, most of the immigrants came from Greece, Italy, the former Yugoslavia, but now there are more, we call them visible ethnic groups are coming to. Visible ethnic groups. You can see them physically, they're different from the previous group of immigrants. And so a lot of biases and stereotypes, and it's easy to misjudge a child's behavior. And it's easy for many teachers to jump to conclusion that she's not good or he's not good, he doesn't concentrate, or so there is this misassessment, misidentification, or is really problematic. And like, for instance, 5 years ago, was it 4 years ago, we received more than 160,000 Syrian refugees in 3 months period. And that put pressure on schools. And many of these new arrivals or newcomers, they moved to the already immigrant concentrated areas. So I am positive in many ways, normally optimistic person, but when it comes to the education of immigrants in Sweden, it's gloomy. And if you are immigrant, and if you are disabled, and then you are from a poor family, and then if you are a boy, the gender aspect is also important. Why are boys overrepresented in special education placements? Especially when it comes on social emotional problems, behavior problems. So it's very important to work hard on that area, and especially to disaggregate what's the major cause of this unacceptably low achievement, low level of educational success among immigrant groups. Are you satisfied?
We're great.